Good evening. Welcome to Laser Talk Brussels. This is our last gathering this year, 2022. And I'm very happy just you are here because in Brussels it's raining and the temperature is +10, like David Lynch. And today we have our gathering about immersive listening with Roel Heremans and Esther Venrooij, and it will be moderated by Edith Doove, who is with us today. And we are invited, as usually, and very, very happy to be here by email. So we start now because it's streaming, so just if somebody listeners are online, so just welcome. We will be with you now 1 hour and a half, following how it will develop. And I would like to give the microphone to Edith to start the discussion.
Yeah, okay, fine. Good evening from me as well. I'm also very pleased to be here and with an audience, which is great because and at Imal again. So I'll give you a small introduction of our guests. So normally we have artists and scientists, and tonight is a bit different because we could say, well, we only have 2 artists, but they have a strong connection to science in one way or the other. And so the laser talks are always about the connection between art and science. Roel Heremans is a transdisciplinary artist working with sound, composed introspection and neurofeedback. In most of his works, he composes fragments of audio that trigger the imagination of visitors in order to create immersive group experiences. As a result, the visitors simultaneously become actors, witnesses, performers, and reenactors of mental and physical processes of thought and movement, where collective performances encounter individual reactions and vice versa. Esther Venrooij considers her dual roles as artist and composer as occupying 2 different sensorial planes. She creates work in a variety of media, such as composed music, improvised combinations of electronica, video, and site-specific installations. With a sharp focus both in her studies and creative impulses on audio topography, she explores the way sound and movements inhabit space. And having collaborated live and in the studio with a variety of visual, sound, and dance artists, her biography reads like a mixed media map of projects. Now, both artists will show some of their work, and we start with Roel. You've selected a series of videos or parts of videos with which you want to introduce your way of working.
Sure. First of all, very nice that you all came. Very cool to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Alexandra, Edith. Let me see. Where are we? Okay. So, is this viewable? Yeah. So I was wondering which one to show first. Maybe I'll start with this one. This is a piece which is called Quartet A, and this was a few years ago. In the entrance hall of SMAC, the Museum for Contemporary Art in Ghent. And I had this mirroring structure hanging there as like a very annoying thing to be hanging in the middle of the entrance. And so what I'm just going to show now is a few minutes of an interactive imagination composition for 4. So there are 4 random visitors that have a headphone and a specific audio track on, which is a voice. And yeah, so I'm just gonna make you listen to a few minutes. So here it comes.
Close your eyes. Welcome to Quartet A. Try to avoid direct eye contact with others during this work. Imagine you're standing in a line at the supermarket. The only product the supermarket sells is rotten fruit. A good friend of yours is standing at the counter. Who is this friend? What expression do you see on your friend's face? When you look outside of the supermarket, you see that there is colored smoke. What color is this smoke? Slowly open your eyes. Imagine that the two people you see in the mirrors now are two complementary parts of yourself. What would they represent? How could they be connected?
This is, like I said, an interactive imagination composition for random people who actually are lined up in front of this mirror structure. And it's all about going into your own personal space, and this mirroring object in the middle is something that connects the visitors in a contemporary, let's say, ritual. I showed you this, and actually, like, I also made all of these other, what I call interactive imagination compositions.
With your
that is
face
more
in the
like,
direction.
yeah, streamlined. What I always try to do is make a composition, a mental composition for the visitor, and then once in a while, when I ask people to open their eyes, they form a composition, a choreography together in space. And I think it's something that it's hard to explain, but there's so much power in this contrast, where you ask somebody very easily to have a headphone on and to imagine something specific, and then sometimes to ask them to open their eyes, and then like a very almost rigid instruction: go to the white cross in front of you with your head to the left side. There's a big contrast in having very clear instructions that make it somehow easier or give you more comfort, I think. Not for everybody. we didn't agree on this before. So when your eyes are closed and there's a voice that asks you to imagine a lot of possibilities to imagine, this becomes more relaxing, because you know you will be guided through the whole thing. And so very briefly, because I'm already, so I made these bigger interactive imagination compositions, also in other languages,
Se
like
află
in
undeva
Romanian.
între fisurile timpului.
And so yeah, for me this is the core language I always use to really like compose the mental constructions of the visitors. I mean, and obviously it's like you only compose, let's say, suggestions. You cannot compose what's going on in somebody's head. But sometimes when the concentration is good, when the introduction was well, you can sometimes touch magical moments, I think. I call them like the moments where two people meet in like a fictional kind of space and somebody's doing something that you don't expect. These are beautiful moments that you can just put in somewhere in the middle of a space. For example, this was in Gare Maritime in Brussels. This is like a mirroring structure in the middle, what I call the monolith. Also a piece for 4 visitors at once, where it's their mental environments that is, for me, blended with the architecture of the space. So their kind of being together in the space contributes to the space itself. And this is the last project. I actually did my most recent project, which is called the Neuro Ride Arcades with live neurofeedback. This was presented on Ars Electronica Festival. I work together with somebody who has a studio place here above. Kola Fishman, is he here? No, he just went away. But so 5 arcade machines that help you actually imagine specific scenarios. This is a one-on-one work. And it asks you to imagine specific and personal things while your brainwaves are being recorded. Mm. So it's this kind of meta loop that I thought was kind of interesting. So that's a little bit of my introduction.
We'll come back to aspects of these works. Mm-hmm. And now I'm confused how we're going to do this, because you need to be at the computer as well. Are you okay? Yeah?
Microphone, please.
And now you can just start a file, and it's 10 minutes, so I will not talk too long, or maybe even don't talk at all. Hi, my name is Esther. I am indeed a composer. I actually studied as a musician. So when I was invited by you guys of this talk on immersive listening, I started to think about what it is. And the first thing that came to mind is this intense relationship you have with the instrument. I had an instrument where you had to produce the sound. So I was a saxophone player, and this inability to hear yourself. So one of the things I did is that I would stand in front of a mirror or a corner of a room, but the mirror to see myself move, and the corner of the room because that's a really great funnel to catch the sound. So this intense listening, where does this happen? It became a part of my practice. In the beginning, it was very natural in the sense that you keep reviewing and repeating yourself as a musician. Then I became an electronic composer where I organized sounds in time as a line. So I went from musical event to musical event. And then I had a conversation with an American composer about the fact that what I did in my sounds was very spatial. So why would I avoid spatial design? But I was sort of hardcore against academic acousmatic music without any reason, just to be, I don't know, one of my foolish rules. And I started to leave that path and move into space. And that brought me to my journey of my PhD, where I moved from being a composer in time to being composer in space, which was really difficult because I was used to, and then suddenly I had to go, well, where, what? And I noticed that a lot of us was focused very much on technology, on that thing there and this thing behind me and my voice and this, the power of this, you know, the fact that you are quiet and I'm talking and I'm deciding what is happening, one of the issues of your work. And I was sort of overwhelmed by it. And just recently, I went to a concert. It was a piano concert of, I don't know, a classical pianist who played first Schubert very beautifully. And then he went into the Faya. And then he decided to do Rachmaninoff. So that was such an overkill with no sense at all, that at one point I was thinking he finished the Faya and now he's going to start Rachmaninoff. I can't handle it anymore because, you know, to be intensely in a space and listen to what is happening is part of my practice, but it takes also a lot of energy away. And what happens is that I started to observe the audience, and the point that people are losing themselves. Probably when I keep talking for 30 minutes more, you know, you like, oh, shut up, you know, don't talk anymore. But you start to go over your own life. And I like the way people look when they lose themselves. I think in the French it's called rêverie, but it's this going blank, and I love that moment. So I see these immersive moments as being very different, and this is also the moment I have when I compose, because if I compose, I can't touch. I can touch my laptop, but that's not touching, and then I'm trying to draw, so drawing was a way to sort of deal with structure and space, and then it wasn't working, and then I started to use my, as you can see, hands, and I started to zoom out from this, from like, what am I doing, you know, I'm a composer, and I started to move into a completely different area that I think it's not called descriptive geometry, but it's about, you talk about the subject, or you talk about sound without showing sound, you know, not hearing sound, like you don't hear anything. And I love that area because they broke open this direct way of dealing with the subject. Or I also had these many books where people talked about sound, the book Sound, and there is a sound, and I'm doing field recordings, and there's sound, and I felt like, what are they saying? They're not saying anything. I don't know anything. What is it? Is it a voice? And so many questions arose. People explaining to me what their most memorable sound was in workshops. And I became utterly fascinated by things that had nothing to do what they were saying, but with what was happening in that situation. So it was a way of, I always joke about it. I used to be a musician on a stage like this, and then slowly I moved to the side, like that space there, and people would look at me still. And then I moved there, because I was together with the audience. I had the most ideal sonic experience. And then I just moved out of the space. I left like the sound system alone. So there was this slow move out of space. And I think within my work, I don't know, I'm coming back. Like I'm doing these kind of things more often. Like I give lectures, and I answer questions, and this, call it lecture performance, became more important because I felt like what I'm wanting to say not necessarily has to move through a sonic or sound composition anymore. It could, you know, I'm a person, I love to talk, so maybe I can talk about it. And so what is for me still interesting, that I'm still exploring these new paths in thinking about things and listening, and yeah, there's so much more to say.
Shall I just start asking questions?
Yeah, I keep that going. I think he's doing great. This is actually in the University of Leuven. There are 2 rooms. This is the echo room, like very reverberant room. You can't have conversation there. It's like quite awful. And the other one, people know it's a dead space, but it's not really a good, to be honest, a very good dead space, because it had a concrete floor. So it was sort of dead space. But this space was really great. It was like this when we filmed it, and like these strange colors also, like why yellow on the walls and why red. I know why all these chains. I didn't understand anything. So these are all scenographic, scientific decisions that I have nothing to do with. So, yeah, maybe start with the questions. So it will be good.
Thank you both for talking already about your work. So, although you each work in quite a distinct way, so you both bring people explicitly together. You question also the position of yourself, I think, as you just demonstrated quite clearly, Esther. You work with memory, you work with a certain form of manipulation, in which I think there's also a certain risk involved as you work mostly with random participants, so you cannot completely control what you're proposing. And so from your website, Esther, I took the following quote that comes out of your essay film on the process of becoming silent and listening. As humans, we are always looking for meaning in what we experience, and we are always projecting ourselves onto our surroundings, even when we see, hear, or experience nothing. I guess that may be related to what you just said about people losing themselves, in a way.
Well, actually, that's a quote. It had to do with two things. It had to do with actually an anecdote of John Cage that I read. That the famous piece for 33 minutes, the nothing piece, the silence piece, that he before went to a dead room, and that he even in this silent place would hear his own, nervous system and his heartbeat. That's one thing, but also, I was for a while very interested in EVP, electronic voice phenomena, for different reasons. I thought it was so poetic that a person would find in noisemakers, even coffee machines, listening intensely to it and thinking, well, there were three options, or it was we have a connection with aliens, or it was somebody from their own past, or it was an echo of somebody who said something in space. But in any case, you can say I don't take these people serious, but I thought it was so beautiful that somebody somehow tried so hard to make meaning of something which is noise. And I started to hear it as well. Like, they were like, what is this voice? And specifically, I remember one thing, I was in a forest in Morocco. There was nobody there for miles, nobody. I didn't see anybody. And suddenly I heard this voice, singing. And I was thinking, this is what is happening? So beautiful. And then, of course, getting my recording out. And the moment I take it out, the moment I press record, voice is gone. And then I wait, and in the recording afterwards, I listened to myself listening, saying the word nothing. And I thought that was very funny. And so it sort of disappeared. But this kind of, poetry in the daily life, that's maybe where this text comes from.
Okay. I got to know you because you made a work together with, I forgot his name, Hans. Yeah, Hans de Meulenaar. And I wrote a text then for you. And as you just also explained, you worked in quite a different kind of way. And more recently, what we just saw was also a recording of a sort of performance, I imagine. But you've decided to work more in an audiovisual way. Why is that?
Because I felt like it, first of all. No, it's because as a composer, a lot of people talked about my work like I was a filmmaker, that we often say electronic composers are like filmmakers without images. But I also handled in the same way, and I felt suddenly in my research very connected to movie editors. I started reading the text and the way they moved and think and thought, and how sound and sounds worked. And I felt also very happy to work in a very indirect way around sound, and finding images. And even though these images really, they're all about listening or sounding things out. But it's something which came from a long time ago. For me, it's a very direct link of a young girl, mixing her own tapes at home, trying to sort of make this new constellation or awesome tape to the person who is here sitting with you guys.
So there's a lot of ongoing research in your work. What intrigued me in your work, Roel, is that with the examples of your work that you showed, it's very interesting that you talk about composition, composing in space. And but I was also thinking, but you ask quite specific questions. So there's also the issue of writing text, and how does that work for you?
Yeah, so where do I start? I studied a thing called radio in Brussels here, audiovisual art radio, and this was before podcasts, by the way. That was just before podcasts became a thing, and we had to listen to a lot of radio documentaries and sound art, obviously. But what really shocked me, it's like a muscle. Like listening and using your imagination, it's really just a muscle that you can train. And so when we did all these sessions in like a half-lit room, like sometimes 4 or 5 hours of non-stop listening to these radio documentaries or radio plays, let's say, I noticed, I also that was a study about, I guess, it's like you develop this tendency to like, okay, what works in via text for the imagination to start, for example. If you say a red chair, sometimes you have the problem that people imagine surroundings with the red chair. So, like sometimes the way I write my imagination scores, I tell them it's like semantically quite weird sometimes, but because it's all like written down in a specific tempo and timbre that maximizes your imagination or the imagination of the visitor. So it's always been a very choice. Like when people look at documentation of my work, almost everybody thinks I'm working with sound, but actually I'm working always with just a dry voice, a droge stem. I don't know if you say this in English like this, but I think the voice in itself, and especially if you really work long in a studio with people, that you can really like like in a very minutiöse way. What is the word? Meticulously. Thank you. Like put the words down in a timbre like this that really evokes just an image inside of somebody's head.
You also told me that's you started off in quite a particular kind of way. There was an accident. Can you discuss that? Can you talk a
very
bit
briefly.
about that?
This was actually before I studied radio. I was studying philosophy at the VB, and I did an exam. It was around this period, 13 years ago. I was a young kid of 19 years old, and I must have eaten something in Brussels. I was living at my parents' place in Vilvoorde, close to Brussels. And then all my memory stops. So I must have taken the train, then my bike to the place of my parents, and there I got hit by a car, and I suffered 2 brain hemorrhages, a fractured skull, and a broken spine. Went in coma immediately. Woke up with my short-term memory gone, my logic's gone. I had aphasia, and so this all to say that I had a left hemisphere lesion, which means that all the more left hemisphere capacities were like temporarily away. And so I mean, this is a theory, of course, but like left and right hemisphere, the right hemisphere is really how we comprehend life, while the left hemisphere is really how we apprehend life. Like everything that has to do with language, grasping of things, logic. This was temporarily like blocked. And I think it's in that moment that I became an artist. No, but it's true, because for some reason, like I couldn't talk for a while. I couldn't read the clock anymore. I couldn't play ping pong anymore, which was something that I always did with my brother. And like everything that has to do with grasping of life was non-existent, so I just had to let go. And for me, this like sound art in itself, it's like just the listening and letting go of things and listening to somehow what reality throws at you. That's for me super connected to this right hemisphere.
That's very interesting. But I think is the case in both your work and yours is actually this notion of reflection, which comes with slowness. If we look at, so there's what is this? What you're running at the moment?
Yeah, this is a work called Room D for an interactive imagination composition for 8 people. Takes a long time. Takes like 30 minutes, and it's really like very specific movements. Everybody hears something else, and for everybody, the other person is a specific color that is never the same. It was almost like mathematics. This work, yeah.
But you're slowing people down.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
So you do that. What we just saw in quartet A, that's definitely the case. It's also interesting to see what the other audience around it does, sort of trying to figure out what is happening. But the people that have the headphones on are really slowed down. So that is very important for you as well.
Yeah, I think for me it has to do with sensorial deprivation, in the sense that every time all the headphones I'm using, these are like these drum headphones. For me, I mean, obviously the quality of the sound is very important. But for me, what is even more important is like these gigantic headphones that completely block you from any other sound. Because if you come to an art piece or an event or something and you get these headphones on, you have the choice, or you're gonna be like, oh no, I don't want this, or you just completely let go. And if you let go and you kind of go into the experience, then, I mean, sometimes something nice can happen, I think.
I mean, I would like to know what slowness is for you as well, and then maybe you can already start thinking about it, because the next question will be your place as the artist. You were just referring to the fact that slowly you moved away out of the space. I wonder, you are probably always present if you have a performance like that.
Well, what I noticed like while I was doing a lot of these works, is that in the introduction is very important. You just have to like completely like get people with you. You also see it on their faces when they're really listening to you and they really want to go into the thing. But once I start, I get out. I like.
You don't want to observe it directly.
Yeah, and also it's not of my business anymore.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's like I'm not somehow allowed to be there, because it's out there. It runs, and even afterwards, when people have a lot of questions like what was this, I somehow have the feeling that there is nothing I can add.
And who films it then? Can someone else film it, or it can
for me, it doesn't have to be filmed.
Okay.
It doesn't have. This is documentation,
Yeah.
but it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be filmed. It's all
Okay.
about the experience of one person and the group constellations that it brings on that specific moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So coming back to slowness, can you respond to that?
Well, I don't. I actually listened a lot to the works of Alexandra Diege, who her work is very much about slowness. There is like it's like progress work, and it changes slowly, but that is not an objective for me. It depends on the work. when I started out, I made 15-minute pieces of 15-second pieces, because what I wanted to say really fast, and I wanted to create a coherence. So therefore, because I wanted to say so much, it had to be almost like a flipper case. But what I liked about is when you work in an exhibition space or in a house or in a site-specific situation, it's interesting to see if people can take another tempo. So then you design on the way. Am I designing or creating something like a one-liner? People hear it and then they're out, or you create a situation that people can sit down and listen. But I also like this configuration of a space, the sonography, that you have like a staircase. So if you go down, and that's the trajectory, and you go down, so you have a particular tempo. So how do you go? Yeah, you go downstairs, and these things I thought was really really interesting, and it had to do also with the fact that. I remember a story of somebody telling me about this beautiful museum in Japan where they only have a couple of works. Like there's one Monet, and this is sort of the ideal situation. And they talked about the amount of time you get when you walk towards this painting. And I thought this is really great if you, in that moment that you walk towards a work, and then you walk away, how much time you take and to change it. And the way they did it is in a specific spatial organization. So that for me, I like exhilaration, I like slowness, but slowness is not necessary for me in my own work. Yeah.
I think it's something very interesting what you say about this museum, for example. It's never explicitly said how to behave around this Monet or something. I think in most of my works I use it very explicitly. I would love to go to a situation where I can implicitly, guide people, but that's sometimes very hard. I think.
Yeah, can I say something? Because sorry, I'm a teacher. Sorry, because that's exactly. The person who does this is Bruce Nauman in his corridor pieces. Yeah. So he creates a situation, but he did also a work in the Tate Turbine Hall, and not so many people know about it because it's not documented, because it's nothing. It's just speakers and voices. So I think that's what I want to say, is that I'm interested in this indirect way that you create a situation that something happens.
Well, thank you. It brings us to the issue of manipulation, I think, in which sounds negative, but maybe isn't. And it was already a bit indicated. I mean, it's the same. I always say that to my students when I'm teaching, that it's not because I'm on this side of the room that we can't have a conversation, which I hope we will have later on, that you will respond as the audience that is listening to us. You also, because you work in a quite specific way, I guess that with the museum in Japan, it's the manipulation by a curator in a way, or the architect. No. I know it's a big word, manipulation, but still, it's this idea of how do we get the audience to react in a certain kind of way, and both of you are dependent of an audience that you want to behave in a certain way in your space, or listen in a certain way, or add something in a certain way. So, and you told me, Roel, that you get this a lot, that people say.
Yeah, obviously, if you look at the documentation, it looks like a parade from the Nazis or something.
I won't go that far, but
no, I'm just joking. But it's very rigid the way it looks from the outside. But I talked about this balance or this contrast. The more I don't want to explicitly say that, but in the way I compose these pieces is the more rigid the movement and the instructions are, the more it's like a balance, right? The more when you have your eyes closed, you have the time and you have the space to just let things unfold or something.
Yeah. I think it would be nice, I think I'm looking at the time, are there questions of the audience, by the audience? It's always a tricky question, and usually the answer is no. Maybe we can look at... Did you have other examples of your work you wanted to show? You had just one piece now?
No, we can look it up, and it's okay. I think what is interesting if it's really manipulation, because it's you can also talk about the directive of following a narrative, and somehow this reminds me of these listening books. When I was young, you had your cassette, and then you hear ping, and then you have to turn the page. Which I loved, but it's a narrative and you don't know. But I don't have that feeling that I want to leave, like I made work and then leave. I'm really curious to see, and I noticed one time when I did a piece where I was within the audience, and that I see some people walk away, but also some people really dive into it, and I see themselves losing in the work, and I think it's but it has maybe a lot to do with the fact that I'm trained as a musician, so therefore I really like to check up on people, like, are you okay, are you know, it's like this this sort of care I have, and if it's in an exhibition space, if I will not be there all the time, but the care is about, are they able to sit? You know, I hate it. I was in the pond recently, and there was a beautiful video installation, like really beautiful, like with no bench and no chair. I was like, just, you know, there are some so elderly people, they just want to sit, you know, for a while. Give us the opportunity to. So there is for me a balance between manipulation. Yeah, the fact that you are in power because you have a microphone, and that it can be a weapon, or you can give a directive, or it's a narrative, or there are gradations in it, and I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. The way I see it is I compose these things where the voice and the instructive voice guides you as best as possible somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes think that after an experience like this, people just... I think you need some time to let it ponder. And I think if the artist is present, and I understand the care is very important, and like that you're there to care, because people, you know, show their most vulnerable sides in a way. However, at the end of a spectacle from an artist, if the artist is there, like, and obviously people will ask you things, and then you have to, and this always comes back, it's always the same, you have to, like, in words, explain what you wanted to do or what you wanted to lay down, and so you diminish the possibilities of the experience of the visitors to, like, just an assemblage of words from you as the artist, and that's not...
Yeah, it is quite peculiar to talk about it this way, because we can also say, well, a painter or a writer manipulates, if we want to use that word, in a certain kind of way as well, and we're not going to immediately ask, or the painter's not immediately going to ask, so how was it? After you watched my painting, and we sort of, well, of course, this is a yeah.
How was my movie?
Yeah.
Like in Japan, like.
How do you feel now? Yeah, but yeah, but it is kind of interesting because now we're looking at another. Is this at the Maritime as well?
No, this is in Dordrecht, in Dordyard. It's in the south of the Netherlands. It was an old factory, and these are two duets actually. Mm-hmm. So you have two people, and what I really wanted to do there is to completely use as little tools as I could, and just use chalk, and so that the bodies in space become like part of the architectural space somehow, and also the other visitors, because it's a group exhibition, and so the other visitors are walking around, so the bodies in space of the visitors go from subject to object and back or something.
Do they become sculptural?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. I think so. I don't know, but for me, yes.
So, and that's interesting because they have not been chosen by you. I mean, you didn't ask someone with a red sweater, for instance, and to...
No, no, it's like a random collection of like, let's say, colors. And this, I have a lot of discussions with choreographers, for example, because, I mean, if you look at Anne-Therese de Keersmaker here in Brussels, she's, I mean, the bodies in space, they're so like beautiful and trained, and like the aesthetics of the bodies in space is amazing. But I have something like, that's not a very democratic thing. like I think that a body in space, a random body in space, is good enough, or something, that it becomes also, of course, I manipulate them to go and stand in a specific way, but I think this has beauty to it.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting to see the child with the pink sweater and then the woman with the green
Voilà,
vest
yeah,
and so on. But then this is just one moment that you've actually filmed it.
Yeah.
So there might have been other
Absolutely. Yes.
ways that you've missed.
Yeah.
And you just really want to see what's happening. I mean, it may be also different in the way that you show your work. I mean, how long, for instance, this one, was it just once, or was it during a certain time? Same question for you in a bit.
Well, it's a loop. It's a looped work. It's like two duets. One work is around 12 minutes. The other work is around 16 minutes, and they get presented in loop. So when it ends, mostly an assistant or person that is there invites people. Like, mostly it's the first time that you have to start it, and automatically people come by, ask like, what is this? And then you just say it's an experience. You can wait here for another 5 minutes, and you can also do it.
And do you do it during one day, or can it be something that is, I don't know?
This was a group exhibition that took for a month and a half, I think, and like from Thursday to Sunday you had like experiences ongoing.
I have a question. It's always pre-recorded text, or sometimes you are staging being like live?
I did some experiments with that, but what I noticed is it's like so important that you're like you already ask from somebody to close their eyes, to stand there very vulnerable. And for me, the least I can do is to really put the voice down in such a way that it's just like you don't have to do an effort. Like the image just comes up, you know? So obviously it's cool. I think it's nice to do it like live. But I do think the imagination instructions have less quality.
Are you writing your instructions?
Yes.
Are you testing them?
Yes.
So you perform it yourself, you calculate the distances you need, and then you kind of, you know what exactly at each position to each time should happen.
Yes, and some of these works are very complex, like the one I showed just before, like the Room D. And I mean, you say you test it. Well, yes, but most of the time it's like I make it from scratch and I test it in my head, but like then it's there. And sometimes I'm really fucked, because if there's an error in there and I show it and people come, because you only can test it if you, with these bigger words, if you're 8, you know? So if there's an error in there, that's not good. So I have to edit it on the spot, which sometimes happened. But yeah, I write them mostly myself. Some works I've been working with other writers, but for me it has to be it has to be real. it has to feel if I'm there and I'm listening to this, then something needs to happen. And if it's not the case, when you just take a random text from somebody else, if I don't feel it, then I don't show it or something.
I have another question. And what about, because you often show them in a busy spaces, in the big spaces, and even if you use cancelling headphones, there's a lot of visual distraction around. You foresee this, or you play with it, you include that?
Well, it's very simple. Like most of my works, it's like close your eyes. Like the video I showed you in the beginning, it's like close your eyes. And most of the time, if you close, most people, I would say, but again, I cannot decide or grasp it, but when you have your eyes closed, you have a noise cancelling or a very drum headphone, and the voice is really slow and you have to let go, then most of the time it works. Even like the reverberations or the noise is amplifying that feeling, at least for me. It's like when you go to this very busy bar and you just go working, like the noise from the bar really enhances your concentration sometimes.
That is maybe also what Esther referred to as losing yourself in the work, because you said on the one hand you like to observe, and on the other hand you then just
I don't like to observe.
Well, oh no, you get out, but you want to know that something is happening. You want to make sure that when you give a certain text, that people will respond to it. So you'll have to observe for at least once, I guess, to check whether it works.
Well, if it again, like this is my position. I create something and I hope for the best. And the more works I make, and I observe very well the reactions of people. And if it doesn't work, I think I unconsciously take that with me. But so I just hope for the best. I always think like my works are like building a house with building blocks of air.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's nothing you can do to foresee that somebody is concentrated or not. But the only tools I have is this voice, and this voice that is like in a specific timbre. You know, when a voice takes...
But that is exactly the thing of reverie, I think. Just because... last question to you, and then I'll go back to Esther. I guess you never had someone halfway getting out.
No, it happens. It
Yeah,
happens.
it does?
Yes, it
Yeah,
happens.
yeah.
And this has to do with... And I take it on myself most of the time, because that mostly means that a person is not immersed enough. And okay, it can have all sorts of reasons, but when somebody decides to step into your work and to put on those headphones, and maybe they already saw people doing it, and maybe they saw good reactions or smiles or I don't know what, then the text should be, and the immersion should be as good as to not have a person run out.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So you, Esther, said that you're curious to see what's happening. So how long do your works last, or how do you do that then? How can you observe them?
Yeah, I think I work from a very different angle, because first of all, we go to this word immersion. There are so many different kinds. So you have I don't know also what you mean with good immersion. I was thinking, I remember being immersed in MSBR, who was a sort of Japanese sound, who created this sound that was so loud that it hurt. And that I had to dive behind somebody to shield myself from the pain. And then slowly it went up, and then I went down, and I was thinking, this is also immersion, but not really. This is good. Yes, this is good, but it's also not good. And immersion can. So I don't know this is good or bad or something like that. But what I think time is very interesting. Like I I started to notice in the beginning that I made pieces that were like 15 seconds, but then I made pieces that were the same length of a song. And that came from technology, because before songs were limited to a small record, so 2 minutes and something, and then you had to sort of close. And then we had the technology that you could have a CD, so pieces could become longer. And then you have somebody like Lamont de Jong, who made these long durational pieces of hours and hours and forever. So I was entrenched in this awareness of time and how you would move through time. And so it depends on the piece and on what I would like, but I'm very interested in I think if I would look at your work, Roel, I would be the one who would be sitting and looking at people, but I would also maybe judge them a bit, like oh, what are zombies, and like, why are they doing this? But then it reminds me also, I do understand the poetics of it, because this scene somehow reminds me of being in Pergamon Museum in Berlin, where like I was the only one who didn't rent out this audio tour, and then people were like, so there's a large spaces, and I thought it was very funny to have this famous entrance of a Greek temple within a space. And I thought this whole story, like, oh my God, they took this by car over a mountain and they put this in a museum, and now it's there and people are not listening, and they therefore make a lot of sound. So I was in this really reflective space with people like didn't care, like because they were so locked in their audio tours. I love these moments that I'm the only one like enjoying myself. So, for me, it just depends on the situation. But I really felt like how to deal with this. You want to come across and how to check if you want to, if you establish something. So response of the audience is really welcome. And as I told you before, this had to do with my training that as a musician, you don't walk away. So you are very much aware of this group you are in. Not only the players among yourselves, but you're like, are you? And I like this interaction. But I also liked one of the big long durational pieces I really enjoyed was with Alexandra that I organized a concert. She was there, but she was like in the space next door. Don't ask me why, but there was a reason, a technological reason. So she was not visible, but you had this really large group of people like doing this. And she was outside looking at people, and I was outside looking at her looking at people. And I thought, this is so interesting. I'm looking, and I like this way of seeing. And the way she said also about spatial design, what works for her, what does not, is not only calculate, but she said for her it's very much an intuition. And I think also having a conversation with her about intuition and allowing intuition to come in and not calculate everything, things indeed can happen. So for me, it is from that area I work.
Thank you.
It's true. Yeah, like the big difference is then, of course, all these things are very calculated, and then we come back to explicit and implicit. And I just think that things that come to you as a spectator, as a visitor, implicitly, these are the most beautiful things. I mean, obviously, when you see that everything is like pre-recorded and pre-done and everything, that kind of, you lose some kind of strength. However, with anything that's implicit, you can never go like several steps further inside of a composition. And that has always been my frustration, because it's like somehow, it's dirty. Like I predetermine everything, and people have to imagine, and just then the magic would happen. And of course I would like to have things that flow up implicitly. The problem is there. I cannot add more layers to it. You see? It's a battle you always lose.
Yeah.
Somehow.
I'm going to try the audience again, because I'm really curious whether there are any audience members who have been experiencing these kind of installations or experiences, and what they felt about it, and if they want to talk about it.
I have experienced one of your, actually probably two of your installations. So I'm sorry, because I have. Are you doing also live installation of live situations with your works? I haven't really totally understood that. If you are actually doing live situations where the public actually is part of the work yourself.
No. Yeah, I find it very. Yeah, that is a very difficult question. I have to think about it, because when you design or when you create something in an exhibition space, you get an exhibition situation. I created like an elevated floor. People are on it, so therefore become part of the work. So it's not the object per se, but it's also the sound coming from the sounding floors and then people on the object. So, but I am also. I collaborated with musicians also a lot. So we are then on stage and I perform my works, and so this human element is very important, but therefore also to let the others in, and that is the way I prefer to work. So that I'm a composer that results to a lot of problems, like being on stage and then you had a score and then you're looking at the pianist who's doing some romantic shit and you're like, oh my God, what is he doing? So, but that is sort of welcomed. And it also means when you're in a sound exhibition, which I like a lot, that my sounds moves always everywhere, that other people's sounds come in. So, and that is always a problem with sound exhibitions, because other artists not often really like that at all, which I find hilarious, because you can't shut off sound, it moves everywhere. So the geste of, or the invitation to come in, I think is very crucial, I think, on the level of when you listen to me talking, or we work together, or you as a person can be part of it, I think. That is how I work.
Say something.
I know, Esther, so I can add on just on your response. So like you basically almost answer, but what I want to add is this sense of empathy, and while you're doing it, there is this indeed invitations for it's not like this authoritarian instructions, but it's always somehow in consideration to the others, and like this more open view of accidents to happen. And also you have it also during your teaching practice. It's like a moment where you see the situation that goes in a totally different direction, but you just grasp it and make something out of it. And that's a beautiful thing about Esther, because she's a very good improviser. So in that sense.
The improvisation thing. But I mean, just to rebalance things, I mean, I experience your works on the other hand, so I just want to rebalance things, because my impression is that despite the fact that there is a lot of instruction constantly being sort of given into your ear, it's very intimate, and my experience was that I was not given orders. I was sort of pushed, invited gently, or I was just suggested, or I was just invited in a very sort of gentle way to participate or to be part of in a dream or in something very gentle, like totally not. So yes, instructions are not necessarily something that is rigid, and so as that sort of intention of that go necessarily with rigidity or with orders or with. Yes, to me the association is not necessarily there in your work. In my experience, that's what I want to say.
It's nice, thank you.
That's interesting to have an inside experience as well.
Also, I have to come back to Alexandra's question. You asked me, was there anything ever not pre-recorded? And actually, I showed the video already. The work in Venice. I mean, I could have taken my headphones there, but I decided, fuck it, I'm not gonna bring my headphones, and I'm just gonna try to completely have one instruction. So one, like me and this performer, we drew a chalk circle at Punta della Dogana, which is one of the most touristic places in Venice. And so the cool thing what already happens is nobody sees it. Nobody sees a person walking around. And so the whole work was about whenever somebody saw it, whenever you see somebody doing like, oh, what is happening here? Then I came into the play and asked them like, okay, if you want to be part of it, you step into the circle, and then the performer gave an instruction to the other person. So what happens is something, of course, you cannot foresee or you cannot predict, but it kind of evolved into this multilingualism, like of course a lot of people from everywhere in the world, and just like a sort of a chain work or a clockwork where when one person stepped towards another person, then something else happened, and this person was then raconting, like telling a bedtime story in Italian while they're talking saying it in Spanish and in French. But the problem there, just one thing. The problem there is it's beautiful. It's beautiful. You know, it's like magic that is happening. You know, just a set of rules, just very minimalistically. The only problem is it takes around 7 minutes and then everybody's out. Everybody's just like, okay, it was a nice try and we gave it our best. But if you don't have a structure or like a ground thing that kind of perpetuates it, it just ends. It just ends because the energy is lost.
Yes, but at the same time, for example, I've seen one of the theater piece with staging, and also it was several years ago. Just I don't remember the earth, unfortunately, but it was very interesting because it was with the air speakers, and it was 3 at least performer who proposed different instructions, but also quite gently, but also seeing where people are and sometimes creating some sort of unexpected situation. Okay. So, and this was live, so it means everybody was in the ears, so just ear speaker, but it was directly more or less like giving some instruction to them. So I thought maybe you will work.
Okay.
Yeah, because the idea of a certain time, is that important for you? Used to be? Is it still?
Yeah. I think time, you know, we humans, we think linear often, and time is sometimes circular. I was this weekend I was in Friesland, where it was very nice. It was a planetarium of Eisinga, who is a Dutch, I don't know, he's not even an inventor, but he created the oldest planetarium of the world. And it was very interesting. So it's a very complicated, so his living room shows the movements of the planets and the way they turn, but you can't see it move. So like I think it was Jupiter, who takes 11 years to be around the sun, and then but then we went upstairs and there was only one thing moving. So there was it's sort of, I thought it was just so beautiful. So you have one movement in the whole installation, and some turns take a year, some take 11 years, and you can't see anything move, and you just look at the ceiling. It was really quite spectacular, but we think linear, that can be vertical, or it can be from left to right, or from right to left, and it's very difficult also to step out of it and say, okay, I'm gonna now experience nothing. I also notice with younger students, when they play saxophone or piano. I mean, you never have a problem with the frequencies, like playing tones. But once they have to play a long note, it's like ta, and then you see the glaze in their eyes, like how long should it be? And then they start looking at you like, I have to go, or have a break. Like when I was a saxophone player, I had to wait like 60 bars, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3. Okay. 61 more to go, and then pop, and that's it. And that was like your moment. And if you're not there, it's so this. And I also like this the way we talk, and we see history and how we experience history. And one of the first times I had a different time experiences when I was in a choreography piece of Mary Fulkerson, one of my teachers at the dance center, and she said, "This is time." She said, "It's a square. So you, Esther, are this." I thought, what is she saying to me? Like, I'm this? But she said, yeah, you're all little plants, and the piece is called the garden. And some plants, some people are rocks. Esther, you are a rock. And other people are plants, and they move around you. And I thought, that's really interesting. So this idea that time is a square, and that everybody has their own duration within the whole. And she saw herself not as a choreographer, but as a gardener. And I loved that. That was an amazing piece. And then suddenly she said, and in the middle of the piece, we're going to do a choir piece. And so there is still this linear idea of first part, middle part, end part. But yeah, that is how I grew up, and I was trained. But I think a lot of the thinking and the musical thinking, and especially 20th century experimental musical thinking, it flew into my own practice. Like one of the most profound experiences I had was with Christian Wolf's piece, and I tell students also about these pieces. This is like schizophrenia. I mean, the sense that we had to be on stage and you're just scared because there's no sound, and you can only start when there is a sound. So it was like, yeah, now I go. So you had to your response depended on what was happening, and this response didn't always come from you as a musician. So this awareness of things happening in time, and these were very difficult pieces for the audience. The people were like, what are they doing? Like looking and like being like really a bit, how do you say, paranoid, in this paranoid state. But I like these different, for me as an artist, I like these different states of mind, that not every piece is sort of the same state of mind. Some of the like, you're not insane, and some of you change. And I think when you talk about slowness, the slowest piece I made was a 40-minute piece. It's called Vessel, and it's about my experience of the Dutch landscape. And I grew up in a small town where I heard the boats at night. So in the 80s and 90s, these were engines from the 50s and 60s. So you had not the kind of boats, but you had this kind of boat. And at night, when I would lie in my bed, these signs came in, and I only, when I was older, realized I'm using this kind of sound a lot. Apparently, it's a childhood memory. So I made this piece about it, and I really just had a simple idea that I said I want to like have this idea that a ship would come into a space, like this ship, but then it's the question, like, how do you get in? How do we move? How do we go from, how do you make it bigger? So for me, it's about, when you talk about time and also about dividing time and the way people listen, because I performed a lot, I know the time span. So this is already very long time for you guys. I think 20 minutes was already, good enough to get the information. But when you go over 40 minutes, people lose themselves, you know. They have no idea. Actually, they think about other things. So, and even when you move into this area we are in now, like 80 minutes or something, it's like then things become expanding, and this is something. This is what was really trying in the years I was a musician, that I performed pieces of Cage and Morton Feldman, that they were expanding pieces, challenging the audience like they wanted to die, you know, and that you keep going, and then this, after this, and this I also like, after feeling really bored, that you are like really like, I can't anymore, and then you suddenly you're out and then you return. I love this flow of feelings. And the one I was happy with was that one of my teachers had a Morton Feldman piece, and he was really like, you know, Esther, I want to do this piece on trombone, and you know, it's a long piece. It's very important that they see that there's no repetition. So I proposed to make his. We hang a line from like diagonal, and I said, Jim, I'm gonna hang your score so people have a sense of the length, and they slowly see you move. And that was really a nice experience where I felt like, oh, time and space, yeah. And also that people were like, oh, finally the end of this piece. Because it keeps, you know, with Feldman, it's like, it's always variations and never really change. There's no progress. There's no like dramatics, like, oh, now we are going to this high intensity. And these different sensations were really, you know, freeing my way of working with my own materials, moving me, you know, that I'm even, you know, not even making sounds. And that's really liberating. Yeah. Sorry for this long monologue.
Well, I hope that the audience doesn't want to die, but I don't think so. But maybe we sort of get to the end of this conversation anyway, in a quite natural kind of way. I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Well, just I would like to add that I'm very happy to have this conversation. Maybe long, not long, just like it was very interesting. And also just invite you for our next session. It will be in January, at the end of January, so we will put it on in our Imal site. And another thing that I would like to add, that there is very good film, probably everybody, not everybody saw it. This is film of Archipel Queresecul, Memoria, about listening. So if you would like to see it after, so you're welcome. And thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much, Imal, hosting us, and thank you very much for our technical team doing this fantastic work that everybody see and listen us. Thank you.
Thank you.